This week, discontent grew in all regions of the continent. Political and social issues are driving opposition politicians to marshal their supporters to the streets. What is driving the anger in some of these countries? We spotlight the national shutdown demonstrations on World of Africa with me, Erik Njoka. Welcome to the show. Now, countries in the 4 cardinal points of Africa witnessed much ruckus on March the 20th. Angry citizens of Kenya in the east, South Africa in the south, Senegal in the west, and Tunisia in the north protested against the high cost of living, seeking constitutional reforms and a change in leadership. This is how it went down.
Monday the 20th was a significant day for Kenya. The country's opposition, the Orange Democratic Movement or ODM, had prepared their supporters for a major procession in the capital Nairobi. What was expected to be a peaceful Maandamano, Swahili for protests, quickly turned violent, with the police having a hard time controlling the assembled youth.
My good friend Raila Odinga, you cannot, enough is enough. You cannot continue to blackmail the country. And we have no problem with you organized demonstration. But please, it is your responsibility to work with the police to make sure that the rest of the citizens of Kenya, their lives are not disrupted, their property is not destroyed, their business is not affected, they can go to work, you can carry out your demonstration.
Opposition leader Raila Odinga had simply ignored this call by the president.
Today was a start. We'll have demonstrations again every Monday. Next Monday, we'll be demonstrating again every Monday. Do you support us?
Miles south of the continent, South Africa's opposition held rallies under tight security in a bid to force out President Cyril Ramaphosa over his handling of the country's ailing economy and crippling energy crisis. But the turnout was low and calls for strikes went unheeded as the government deployed thousands of police backed by troops to stifle any unrest.
We are here to demand the end of load shedding, to demand Ramaphosa to step down, and if he doesn't want to step down, we will force him to step down.
The left-wing Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, the country's third largest party, had called for a national shutdown, sparking fears of a repeat of the bloody clashes some 2 years ago. Under close escort and with a police helicopter overhead, several thousand protesters marched in the capital Pretoria to Ramaphosa's official residence, passing the seat of government, the Union Buildings.
The Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs has been mandated to gazette the declaration of a national state of disaster. This is to ensure an effective response across all spheres of government to the extreme weather events and conditions that have occurred in several parts of the country.
Public violence, burning of tires and placing of rocks and debris to blockade roads as well as looting will not be tolerated. Ramaphosa said perpetrators who break the law will be dealt harshly.
In Senegal, protests were muted in Dakar as the court postponed Senegalese opponent Ousmane Sonko's defamation trial to March 30th. Protesters and security forces clashed in multiple neighborhoods of the Senegalese capital Dakar as the opposition leader appeared in court in a politically charged trial. Ousmane Sonko is being tried for allegedly defaming a minister, a case that could determine whether he will be eligible to run in the presidential elections in February next year. Supporters of Sonko, who has already declared himself a candidate for the 2024 race, says President Macky Sall is using the judiciary to keep him out of the contest, a charge Sall denies. Sonko also faces separate charges of rape and making death threats. And in Tunisia, the protests were not as big as in recent weeks, where thousands rallied in the streets of the capital Tunis, protesting against President Kais Saied's perceived autocratic rule.
Today, anyone can be summoned by the courts. The problem is the way in which terror is practiced among children and the elderly and nighttime raids on homes for arrests. These practices must stop. We have created a revolution to put an end to these practices based on violence and misunderstanding.
They wanted Said to resign for orchestrating what they feel was a coup last July, pushing for unpopular constitutional amendments. There's an eruption of protests and demonstrations across quite a few African countries. The protests, led by opposition parties in some cases, point to growing and widespread discontent over economic deprivation, power cuts, corruption and failure of governance. In some of the countries, the protests are scheduled to be held every week. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Nigerian inflation quickened at its fastest pace in almost 18 years, placing pressure on the central bank to extend its longest cycle of monetary tightening in more than a decade. Now, according to data published on the National Bureau of Statistics website, the inflation rate rose to 21.9% in February from 21.8% a month earlier. What's causing the surge? Let's find out from our correspondent, Louisa Olaniyi.
Nigeria's inflation is nearing an 18-year high. It picked up again in February, hitting 21.91% in annual terms from 21.82% in January, according to the National Bureau of Statistics data. Inflation rose in Africa's biggest economy for 10 straight months last year. This prompted a series of interest rate hikes from the central bank. The pace of price increases dipped again in December but started to rise in January. Food inflation, which accounts for the bulk of Nigeria's inflation basket, rose to 24.35% in February from 24.32% in January.
Even the market itself, the way it is, you take money to market, you can't buy anything. Before, we know how the market is. We sell, we enjoy, but this time around, you will be at home. You'll be thinking how you go to market, what to buy. So you take money to market, you can't send. Look at the way things is. The way people are even complaining about hungry. Customers will come, no cash.
Core inflation that reflects underlying price pressures slowed to 18.8% from 19.2%, likely due to a chaotic rollout of a central bank plan to replace old Naira notes. The currency swap has been postponed, but it led to a scarcity of cash which dampened spending. However, analysts differ on the impact of the cashless economy move by the government.
We are talking about retailers, we are talking about people that are into, maybe you look at the downstream sector of the oil sector, the gas stations. They're largely driven by cash also. So we have an economy that is cash driven, and again, we're stifling them of cash. No, it was supposed to be mopping up, but it became cash confiscation. They just collect the cash and don't give it back to the people again.
High inflation, weak economic growth and mounting insecurity were major issues at last month's election. Ruling All Progressives, Congress's Bola Tinubu, who is due to take president's office in May, has vowed to address the high living costs. Despite the current situation, experts believe the economy is not doing badly. It still remains the largest in the continent with a growth rate of an average of 3%.
We've seen unemployment rate comes very, very high. GDP still low, and so definitely it has not had any impact on our economy, because the higher the GDP ordinarily, the more employment opportunity, because that means a lot of businesses are opening up, a lot of sectors are employing. But in our own case, our GDP is low, and then our unemployment level is very high.
Policymakers have linked inflationary pressures to Nigeria's infrastructure problems and the fact that a lot of items people consume are imported.
We need proper structure, proper systems, and quality institutions to ensure that we have the right kind of policy environment. And that will require that the incoming administration have very good technical team to manage the economy. We need to see less of politicians managing the economy. We want to see more of technocrats managing the economy at all levels and managing key institutions of state that impact a lot on the economy. Those things are very, very critical to get it right.
Africa's most populous nation is being roiled by internal crisis. Experts are calling for urgent reforms in all major sectors of the economy. This includes appointment of technocrats at key economic positions to boost growth.
The fear of Africa's biggest economy lagging behind the continent's smallest nations calls for worry. The incoming government of the nation sure has a lot on their table as both small and big businesses, investors alike, look forward to a more vibrant economy. From Lagos, Nigeria, Louisa Olani, WION, World is One.
3 months after Sudan's military leaders and the country's main pro-democracy group struck a deal set to organize a gradual transfer of power to civilians, they have reached a timeline. The finalized political settlement will be inked on April 11 this year, while institutions of the Transitional Authority will be formed on the same day. However, major political players, from former rebel leaders to grassroots pro-democracy networks, remain opposed to the deal, despite internationally brokered efforts to draw them in. Here's a report from Khartoum.
The leader of a powerful paramilitary force in Sudan has put himself at the forefront of a planned transition toward democracy. This has unsettled fellow military rulers and has triggered a mobilization of troops in the capital, Khartoum. General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo commands tens of thousands of fighters in the paramilitary rapid support forces. He has amassed considerable mineral wealth. He is also deputy leader of Sudan's ruling council, which took power in a coup more than a year ago. Recently, Dagalo, widely known as Hemedti, has pulled away from military colleagues and found common ground with a civilian political alliance, in a move that could establish him as a major figure even after the democratic transition.
I say to you, remove your hands from sedition in the military institutions and among Sudanese society, and give the chance to the people to enjoy a stable political transition and to choose at the end of it who will rule them without fraud and forgery.
Concerned about his intentions, the army, under ruling council leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, stationed more soldiers in the capital on a state of alert. While tensions have since eased, Hemedti's underlying differences with the army have not been resolved, and the risk of confrontation remains. This could send Sudan, which sits on a volatile region between the Sahel and the Horn of Africa, into deepening instability.
Every person should take their rights. If any person does not take their right, we will not advance. Dishonesty will not make us advance. We should move forward properly.
Sudan's military leader and pro-democracy forces vowed to begin establishing a new civilian-led transitional government on April 11th. Sudan has been plunged into chaos after a military coup led by the country's top general Abdel Fattah Burhan removed a Western-backed government in October 2021, upending its short-lived transition to democracy. The takeover came more than 2 years after a popular uprising forced the removal of Omar al-Bashir and his Islamist government in April 2019.
We affirm to our people our firm commitment to the transition to democracy and holding elections in due time in 2023. And we renew our firm commitment to achieve the revolution's goals represented by freedom, peace and justice.
Since December, progress and consensus building have been slow. Major political players, from former rebel leaders to grassroots pro-democracy networks, remain opposed to the deal, despite numerous internationally brokered efforts to draw them in. A restoration of Sudan's democratic transition would likely see a new wave of cash flood the African country. Since the coup, international aid has dried up, and food and fuel shortages, caused in part by the war in Ukraine, have become routine, plunging Sudan's already inflation-riddled economy into further turmoil. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Libyan boxers nowadays fight and train in Tripoli. The sport was banned by former dictator Muammar Gaddafi from 1979 until his downfall in 2011. Since then, athletes have strived to revive boxing and boxers have shone in various competitions. Here now is a report.
In 1979, combat sports were banned by Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. He considered such contests a threat to his personality cult. Officially, authorities considered the sport too violent, despite Gaddafi's regime being accused for more than 40 years of atrocities including terrorism, torture, massacres of civilians and targeted assassinations. After Libya's 2011 revolution, in which Gaddafi was killed, Omar Zlitni reunited with former fighters to revive boxing. He, along with others, re-established the National Federation. Under a tin roof in a Tripoli barn, young fighters spar in a dusty old ring. They are striving to be selected to compete in African qualifiers for the Paris 2024 Olympics. Now a coach, Zlitni deplores the lack of support from authorities.
I
had an ambition. We were going to fights in Italy, but suddenly boxing was banned, so I got frustrated and stopped boxing. It's unfortunate what happened, because boxing used to bring us together and we used to do it for fun with friends. Boxing brings everyone together, but all of a sudden it was banned and everyone went their own way.
A crowd of spectators seated on plastic chairs shout at a boxer parrying blows from his opponent.
I hope that girls would love this sport. On the contrary, I think it is a very nice thing. It is not that being too young or old would prevent you from boxing.
Other combat sports have reappeared and emerged in Libya since 2011. For Omar Boubia, an ardent kickboxer and Thai boxer, their existence provided the opportunity to develop new passions. A fan of action films, the 29-year-old says he first came across a Facebook group dedicated to kickboxing in his hometown of Benghazi in 2013. Having gone on to win several competitions including regional titles, Boubia now trains in a modern gym in Tripoli. Dressed in gloves and shorts in Libya's colors, he delivers strong punches and kicks to a punching bag while filming the scene for his 14,000 followers on Instagram.
I love it because it gives you self-confidence, so that when you encounter any problem, you can overcome the problems on your own, and it allows you to have a sense of responsibility and remove negative energy.
Many boxers, young and old, say there is a gap between Libya and its neighbors in such sports, but believe that perseverance and patience has made it possible to break down prejudice held about Libyans. Most of the upcoming boxers dream of reaching the top, even becoming world champions. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Cancer patients undergoing chemotherapy often lose their hair as a side effect of the treatment. A beautician in Nairobi is helping to improve cancer patients' self-esteem with free wigs and makeovers. Here's a story of hope from Kenya.
Hairdressers at this salon are expertly styling a selection of wigs. These are for a very special group of clients, cancer patients. Beautician Diana Akic runs a salon that pampers women receiving treatment for critical illnesses. She was inspired to do this after she lost a close friend to cancer.
I like to give them a second chance, like just trying to remind them how beautiful they are, because sometimes it really affects their self-esteem. So they know when they walk into this salon, they know they'll come out feeling fabulous and looking fabulous.
She runs this service through her local charity, Pink Butterfly. The women get these makeovers for free. Helping them feel gorgeous again comes at an emotional price for Akic. Sometimes her clients don't make it.
Over the years, I've dealt with about 700 women, and I think so far we've lost about 200-300 women, and it's not been easy because you tend to become very close with the survivors. You become friends. Then when you hear you've lost the survivor, it really breaks your heart, and it's hard. It's really painful.
Grace Momo is a breast cancer patient. Before her diagnosis, she loved going to salons to get her hair styled. This service has helped her rediscover that joy.
Before the treatment, I felt good when I go to the salon. I feel like I'm a complete woman. But when I lost my hair, I didn't feel like going to barber shop because I don't belong to that place. So when I came to salon and have those weeks, I feel again like other women. And I feel so comfortable and I feel like I belong to somewhere.
Hair loss not only affects how patients view themselves, it also changes how people view them. For some, getting wigs or getting makeup done here has helped them to become more accepted in society.
Typically, the hair will fall, not for all chemos, but for many of them, will fall within 4 to 6 weeks of treatment. But once this chemotherapy treatment is completed, then the hair regrows within a period of 4 to 6 months. So for patients who are on chemotherapy and they stop chemotherapy, there is regrowth of their hair over time. So it's not a permanent condition.
Typically, a wig costs about $300 in Kenya. However, Akich has managed to keep the initiative alive through funds donated by strangers who see her work on social media platforms. In Kenya, cancer is responsible for 7% of deaths per year. After cardiovascular and infectious diseases, the country records about 39,000 new cases of cancer every year. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The largest gathering of ethnic runway models, fashion designers, artists and fashion professionals celebrating and promoting local culture, diversity and pride converged in Abidjan, Ivory Coast for the Afrique Fashion Week. Here's a glimpse of what was showcased.
It's a platform to learn for those of us who want to enter the fashion world. To learn first. Through the fashion shows, we see that others create, and through that, we get inspired. And for us also to exchange with other stylists and other designers, and of course, to make ourselves known. It's an opportunity to have a little more visibility.
C'est une occasion pour un peu plus de visibilité, quoi.
Today, we believe that the fashion sector, is a provider of jobs and can therefore absorb a large number of young people looking for work.
And that's our time this week on World of Africa. Talk to us on all our social media platforms. Your feedback is highly appreciated. Until next week, thanks for watching. I'm Erik Njoka, and goodbye.